Well, I sure hope that intro music works because it did not sound like it worked on my phone. All right, gotta love the new setup for the podcast. I think that played. It might not have, and I'm not sure why that didn't. So that was weird. But we are ready. We are here. It is Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast, and I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner. And however you're listening, wherever you're listening, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube page, just look up Bombs Away on YouTube. You can also find Bombs Away on Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called nowadays, and also on Facebook as well. So we got a lot to break down with these Minnesota Twins over the last few days, and it has been an interesting journey, to say the least, for the Twins. Again, the last time we talked, the Twins were on a hot stretch. They had a really, really big game against the Texas Rangers. They ended up winning 3 out of 4 in that series and went on to then win the first game against the Cleveland Guardians. The Twins had a 7-game lead in the American League Central, a 96% chance, according to Fangraphs, to win the American League Central after that, and it looked like the Twins could pretty much just put it on cruise control. And then, like so often has been the case with the Minnesota Twins this season, whenever they have momentum, whenever it feels like things are just there for them to run away and just hide and be done with it and not have to mess with anything, that is when the wheels start to fall off. And for the Twins, that's exactly what happened, as they then lose the next 2 games to the Guardians, and 2 games that really they had chances to win. The Twins went 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position in a 4-2 loss to the Guardians on Tuesday night. And then the most egregious one of all, you could look past that one and say, all right, Cleveland, they pitched a good game. The Twins didn't really hit. That's fine. You're going to have a clunker every once in a while. Then the Twins faced Tyler, something like that, Beebe, with not Chad Beebe, not the Vikings wide receiver, not Don Beebe, his dad, but different Beebe, spelled differently, I think, because there's an I instead of a B, or instead of an E, but you get my point. Twins then lose that game as well. They had a 2-0 lead heading into the top of the 8th inning. Caleb Thielbar gives up a run, and then the Twins go into the 9th ahead 2-1, and that's where things start to get interesting. Yohan Duran gives up a walk and then a single, and then there's a ball that looked like it could have been a double play. It was hit right back to Duran. Couldn't quite field it cleanly. Now, I was listening on the radio. I didn't see a replay of it. I don't think I still have. So I guess I can't say definitively, was it a hot smash that like he just had to, basically do everything he could to smother it, and it would have taken a really, really good play to turn 2 there? Or is it you got the 1 out, but now 2 would have been nice, and whatever. You're not going to scoff at outs. You still will take outs. But in a 1-run game, there's not a lot of margin for error, and you saw that down to the potential last strike. I believe it was Bo Naylor. Naylor walked. I guess I'm blanking on who the guy was. It doesn't matter which one of the guys that swung or didn't swing or whatever on a pitch that went to the backstop. It scored the tying run from third base, and Duran ended up getting out of the inning. But there was a couple things that were a little controversial. One, the first is that the Twins thought, hey, maybe that pitch hit him, so they went to replay view. Turns out it did not hit him, so he was able to get to stay in the batter's box. It's a weird situation where the Twins are replaying to see if it actually hit him. And the second thing about the play, so they realized, okay, it didn't hit him. But then secondly, they're like, okay, so now did he swing? And that's the thing that's gotten controversy online. Half of Twitter thinks he did swing. Half of Twitter thinks he didn't swing. If you want to go like ticky-tack, technically, I guess, yes, technically he did swing the bat because the pitch almost hit him in the foot. And the ball from Duran, actually, according to the radio broadcast, was a slider that was going behind the hitter. So if you think he was like fully trying to offer at that pitch, it's kind of like one of those like, yeah, technically that's the rule. Technically is it a swing? Sure. But honestly, even the umpire, there's a certain point with umpires, and I've umped like 2 Little League games in my life and been not good at either of them, but I've still umped before. It's kind of know there's a certain point because when you face when the hitters and the pitchers are kids who are 10 years old, they can't find the ball, and they also don't quite know how to throw the ball yet, so it's still very erratic. The catchers aren't used to catching yet against live pitching, and so there's a lot of times as an umpire where you're just kind of dodging and trying not to get hit with the ball and replace a 10-year-old with Yohan Duran, who can throw 105 miles an hour if he wants to. If you see him throwing sporadically and a pitch almost hits the guy in front of you, you're probably going to be kind of moving from your original position anyways, and your eyes necessarily aren't on the bat. So my whole point is to say is like, yeah, is it technically a strikeout? Sure. If you want to really go by the letter of the law, but would it have been like a very ticky-tack and like, you kidding? Like, flip it around. Would the Twins, if you were a Twins fan and that happened to you, would you have said, oh man, that's a ticky-tack call, you can't be calling that? Or would you have been, saying that you would have actually, well, it is the letter of the law. So that's my point. It's like, is it a swing? Sure. But is it worth getting frustrated about? No. I think the more frustrating thing has been Yohan Duran. And I think with Duran and his struggles and everything, I mean, he just hasn't been, he hasn't been locating his pitches, I think is maybe the most basic way of saying it. He was really erratic and sporadic in his last appearance yesterday against the Cleveland Guardians. And there have been times before where it just feels like the location hasn't been on, or he leaves pitches too far over the plate that gets smashed. And there's been people who are saying, well, you shouldn't throw his curveball. There's people saying he's throwing his curveball at the correct amount. I would lean towards the camp of he's definitely throwing, his curveball's fine. And you can't just throw straight gas every single time, because even though it's got a little bit of movement, really it's the heat that people are trying to time up. And if you only throw fastballs, you can do what Ryan Jeffers did to Will Smith the other day, which is I know I could potentially get up to bat, so I'm just going to sit in the batting cage and prep myself to face this kind of guy. And you could see that with Duran, where it's like, yeah, 104 sounds fast, but if you prepare for it a whole bunch, all of a sudden you can probably time it up somewhat. And that's the thing with just Duran throwing the fastball. But Duran just mainly hasn't been finding the strike zone. You've seen it with a lot of these Twins relievers this year. I don't know if, I'm not going to say that there's an organizational philosophy to not throw strikes or to nibble. I just think that when you don't have a lot of confidence as a pitcher, you tend to nibble because you're afraid to leave one over the plate. And then when you eventually do leave one over the plate, it gets hit a ton. Look at Cody Funderburk, excuse me. We'll get to him in a second, but I'm already kind of starting on my Duran thing a little bit earlier than I planned, but really, Yohan Duran is really effective when he's on, but right now there's no other option. Duran has to be the closer, but he's not pitching well. And it goes to this whole point of where they really could have used some help at the deadline when it comes to adding a reliever. Now, again, I talked about it at the trade deadline. Did the Twins really need to add a Yohan Duran type arm? Did they need to add a top of the bullpen type arm? No. So would Duran have helped the Twin? Would Duran have mattered even if the Twins did go get an extra arm of the bullpen? Probably not, because there weren't a lot of options in terms of high tier relievers and closers, high leverage guys. There wasn't really that available. And if there was, if you're complaining as a Twins fan about the return that the Orioles got for Jorge Lopez, or you're talking about the return that the Reds got for Tyler Mahle, you're going to not like the return that the Twins would have had to give up to get a high-end bullpen arm. And right now where the Twins are sitting, there's just nobody to turn to. Griffin Jax has been, he hasn't been, I'm not going to say he's been actively terrible, but he certainly hasn't been sharp. You look at Emilio Pagan, go back 2 months ago and punch myself in the face, because Emilio Pagan has been the Twins' most consistent high leverage reliever at least since the second half of the season. And it's crazy to think that, considering where we were to begin the year. And Emilio Pagan, as we've talked about before in this podcast, can still blow up at any moment. And there's still that gut level feeling that everything is just going to go pear-shaped really quickly. But right now, Emilio Pagan has been the Twins' most trusted and been the Twins' most effective reliever since the All-Star break. And you want to know, there's accounts that 2 months ago, like myself, were trashing Duran. And then yesterday when the Twins brought in Funderburk, and he gave up that 3-run home run to Cole Calhoun, people were like, why didn't they leave Pagan in the game? And it's crazy how long a season is and how often your opinion can change on a player or just your gut feeling. But that's where the Twins are at right now. Yohan Duran has not been effective. Griffin Jax has not been effective. Caleb Thielbar has been fine, but, again, he hasn't, he was never a guy who's, shut you down, throw you out, lights out. He's been an effective guy, not so much blow the doors off you, but just been effective. And right now he just hasn't been as effective as he normally has. And the Twins really don't have anywhere to go. They called up Cody Funderburk, as we talked about, had a great major league debut, got the win, I believe, pitching 3 innings in a start where Kenta wasn't quite able to go the whole way. Kenta only went 4 innings. Then comes in Funderburk. He gets 3 innings, and then you also have, or he gets a couple innings, I believe, and then finishing it out was Cole Sands for the 3-inning save. So basically to say is that the Twins really don't have a high leverage bullpen arm that they can rely on. Brock Stewart had a successful bullpen session, so he could potentially come back and be a high leverage arm. But again, he's a guy with injury history, and the Twins are going to have to trust that. And as we talked about, last week or week before with Jose De Leon, with Brock Stewart, with some of these guys the Twins have relied on to be big arms in their bullpen, and they were for a brief time, and the Twins weren't wrong in saying that there was talent there, but one of the reasons that they were so easily available is because they had some injury history. And if you're the Twins, you say, well, we'll take a chance on it, and we think, if we only need... Here's the thing. People talk about Falvey, getting injured players, and, maybe there's some truth to that, maybe it's not, but, is it that he overlooks injuries? Not necessarily, but it's also like if you see a depreciated value and you think, I only need this for 1 year. This guy has been injured his whole career, but it doesn't matter. I'm not banking on him playing for my team for the next 5 years. I just need him to play for 1 season. And if I can just get him to be healthy for this 1 season, then things will turn around. And you saw that, in the case of maybe Tyler Mahle, where it's like, look, I need this guy to pitch for 15 months for my baseball team. Can he do that? No, the answer was no. But you look at Jose De Leon, he couldn't, he blew his arm out. He had to have Tommy John surgery. You look at Brock Stewart, who had an injury history, which is why he signed with the Twins on a relatively cheap deal. I believe it was a minor league deal, actually, over the winter. And then he stays healthy. If one of those guys stays healthy all season long, the Twins bullpen looks a lot better. But again, where the Twins are standing now, it's not in a great situation. Now, Cody Funderburk, we'll touch on him for a second since he came up, made his big league debut, as we talked about. Got a few strikeouts, 6 up, 6 down. Again, big help for the Twins in terms of trying to close out that game and trying to get things going. But he's a guy who pitched really well as a lefty in the minors, and the Twins were looking for a lefty, especially since Caleb Thielbar, again, has not been super effective. Giovanni Moran was supposed to be that second lefty out of the pen, and he couldn't throw strikes at the big league level, got sent down, and I believe now got put on the IL in AAA, which basically means his season's over at this point, because by the time the minor league season ends and the ramp up, it's just not worth it. So Giovanni Moran's likely done for a disappointing 2023 season. So Funderburk comes up, gives the Twins a little bit of a spark. The story was, on Monday, he was getting ready to go to the State Fair because it was an off day for St. Paul. And all of a sudden they told him he needed to go to Target Field because he was getting called up, and has a nice big league debut. Not so nice of a second attempt. A sequel did not necessarily live up to the hype of the original, but that's going to happen. Funderburk he's a guy who worked himself into being somebody to talk about, but he wasn't necessarily this highly coveted bullpen arm. He was somebody who was having a nice season AAA, coming up to help a unit that's been struggling. So, is Funderburk going to be the Twins' high leverage arm in 2 years? Probably not, but also could he be a piece that helps out the Twins for the rest of the season and potentially in the playoffs? Yeah, of course he could. And he has that opportunity to show the Twins that he can be that guy. But, am I going to get overexcited over Funderburk? No. I think really relievers, especially relievers that don't have a lot of hype coming up out of the minors, really are kind of just a guy until proven otherwise. We've seen this with people like Giovanni Moran. We've seen this out of people like Jorge Alcala, unless they're people who have that Yoan Duran, you guys, this guy is different. And that was what it was like when he came up with the Twins last year. Yoan Duran was, unless there's a guy like that, if a bullpen arm gets called up, kind of treat them as just a guy until proven otherwise. And that's what we have to look at with Funderburk. The whole point is, and I tweeted this out before when Rocco decided to bring him in, took out Emilio Pagan, wanted the lefty-lefty matchup. Cole Calhoun just hit an absolute moonshot against Funderburk to tie the game up yesterday. I said it as he came into the game, and I said, we're about to find out if the Guardians can get Funderstruck, if you will. And the answer is a resounding no. But, when it comes to getting Funderstruck, you Funderstruck around and find out. I think that's maybe the best way to word that. But that's where the Twins bullpen sits right now. It's been kind of a mess. And there was a second there where it looked like they could have got some help, actually. So the Los Angeles Angels, in what can only be described as a cash dump, salary dump kind of move, outrighted all of their players on August 29th. And so what they did is they cut guys like Randall Grichuk. They cut guys like Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, Matt Moore, and there's one other forgetting about. But these are 5 guys, most of whom they traded for at the trade deadline in that desperate attempt to try and salvage the playoff hopes of the Angels, and it completely blew up in their face. They're nowhere near the race, and their lineup has been injured to heck and back, and now they depleted their farm system. They gave up like 3 of their top 5 prospects at this trade deadline. The White Sox have 2 of their best prospects for a month, not even, of Lucas Giolito. So, hats off to the Angels, completely wasting 2 of the best players of all time because Artie Moreno is not a good owner. For all the talks about the Pohlads, and I'm not here to say the Pohlads have been great owners or like this underappreciated ownership group, all I'm trying to say is it can be a lot worse because, my goodness, Artie Moreno should have sold the team last year when he had the chance. He didn't want to be the guy who traded away Ohtani. That was always his thing, is why don't the Angels trade Ohtani and get this massive haul for him, which hindsight 2020, yeah, they definitely should have because there's no way he's re-signing there. But what I think, and it's true in a way, is, Artie Moreno didn't want to be the guy who traded away Shohei Ohtani. He did not want to be the guy who traded away modern day, and let's just be honest, the Babe Ruth of our generation, or Babe Ruth was the Shohei Ohtani of his generation. Maybe the better way to word that, Shohei Ohtani's better than Babe Ruth by like every stretch of the imagination. And, Artie Moreno, the owner of the Angels, didn't want to be the guy to trade him away. And really what you got from that is now you're going to be the owner who wasted the career of Shohei Ohtani. So congratulations. You're not the one that traded him away. You're the one that just let him walk for nothing. He doesn't want to be like the Boston Red Sox when they traded Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. But at the same time, were you going to trade him to the Astros? Were you going to trade him to the Mariners? Where were you going to trade him? Were you going to trade him to the Dodgers? Now, he might go to the Dodgers anyways, but what? You weren't going to try and get some kind of value for that? It just doesn't make sense, but the Angels aren't a smart organization. So really what that move amounts to them is a salary dump so they can get underneath the luxury tax. And if you get underneath the luxury tax, which is not a salary cap, but basically the closest thing that the Major League Baseball teams can get to a salary cap. And if you just go over the limit, you get taxed on how much you go over, which means there's more money an owner has to spend. It's to prevent teams like the Yankees from going out and signing everybody. The unintended consequences, it actually prevents them from spending money. So the Red Sox every other year have to go through like a salary dump. Just to get rid of guys and get underneath the tax. But there were a few players in there who I really thought the Twins should have went after. Now, I never thought that the Twins, when you look at Grichuk, and the other hitter's name escapes me, but my point is it adds to my point, is that I didn't really care who the hitters were that the Twins could have added. Because I think when you look at the Twins lineup, it's not necessarily clicking on all cylinders after only scoring 4 runs in their last 2 games. But what I think is that the Twins kind of really, there's nobody to be the odd man out. There's too many people already kind of locked in here. You could DFA Gallo, you could DFA Luplow to make room for a couple extra bats, and a Randall Grichuk, and maybe even the Yankees, they outrighted tried to put on waivers Harrison Bader. He got claimed by the Cincinnati Reds. Harrison Bader, center fielder, could mash lefties, could have been somebody the Twins could have very much needed to use because you put him in center, you put Taylor in a corner outfield spot, and you really have a nice outfield defense and some people who can crush lefties and whatnot. But the Twins, I thought, didn't really need a hitter because they're getting Byron Buxton back soon, or at least hopeful to get Buxton back soon. Buxton's always a fluid situation. Alex Kirilloff is making his rehab stint, and both Buxton and Kirilloff had at least 1 hit yesterday. Kirilloff had an RBI single. So, how it's going to take the Twins a little bit longer, and they're going to kind of give their guys a day off, a day on, and so on and so forth. The biggest thing with Byron Buxton is he's finally playing center field. He's playing center field for the St. Paul Saints, and it's to, again, as we talked about on the podcast last week, work him up to playing center field for the Minnesota Twins. How often that is, how much that looks like, depends on how healthy Byron Buxton is. And we talked about last week, short version is the Twins really are in the time where saving Buxton for the whole season anyways doesn't really matter. And if you burn him out in the next few weeks, that's okay, because you want him for a playoff run and you want him going max effort over the next handful of weeks. So that's kind of the thing there. But, in terms of Buxton or Kirilloff, who comes back faster, it's got to be Kirilloff who comes back faster, because Buxton, it's not just that they need the bat to get back there, it's that they also need the fielding to get back there, and they need to monitor Buxton. So Buxton only played 7 innings in the field yesterday. He's not going to play today, I don't think, and then they bring him in, and, it's a slow burn. It's a slow process to try and get Byron Buxton back into the swing of things, and to try and see if he can do this, and try and see if he can be a center fielder for the Twins down the stretch. But again, onto the waiver claims, I don't see the Twins getting a hitter, because, again, you have ththose guys coming back and you got to make roster spots for them. And, are you really going to get rid of Willie Castro at this point in the season? Probably not. So, to make room, the Twins lineup is kind of stuck. You have your Julians, your Wallners, your Keplers, your Michael A. Taylors, your Donovan Solanos, your Jeffers, your Vasquezes, your Correas. There's just nowhere to go. Even when the rosters expand to 28, you're still not going to have enough room. And when the rosters expand to 28, you are still going to have to bring it down to 26 for the postseason, and you're going to have to go through a crunch at that point. So, it didn't really make sense for the Twins to add a bat, and it's why, they put in a claim on 4 players from what I heard, and now how the waiver claim system works. And again, I don't believe the Twins, I'm guessing this off of reading Twitter, so I don't have any inside information. But I'm guessing based off of reading things on Twitter, Twins I don't think would have put in a claim on a hitter. They probably would have put in a claim, I think it was 3 or 4 claims that they put total, probably all going towards pitching, especially the bullpen, and trying to help out that aspect. But there were other guys, again, like Lucas Giolito, who pitched for the White Sox and was a Twins nemesis for so long, was pitching for a month in Los Angeles, and now gets pushed over on waivers. You also had Matt Moore, who was a good lefty for the Angels out of the bullpen, would have really, really helped out, especially if you're not quite sold on Funderstruck yet. And also, you get Reynaldo Lopez, who pitched with the White Sox and then got traded to the Angels. And Lopez has had a bit of an up and down stretch. Neither of them really played particularly well as of late for the Angels. But Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez haven't been great for the Angels since getting over there at the end of July. But I would have really liked to see the Twins take a claim on Lopez, take a claim on Moore. If you get any couple of those guys, it's really easy to send Cole Sands or Funderburk back down to the minors, and you can deal with it then. Adding Giolito would have been maybe a champagne problem, would have been a little bit of a luxury, but at the same time, you could kick Giolito to the bullpen. You could have maybe had him, if you believe Lucas Giolito is just as good or better than Dallas Keuchel, then yeah, I could see that. But Giolito has an ERA of like 6 this year. It just has not been his season. I think Giolito, because there's been a lot of people online on Twins Twitter who think that Giolito would be a good Falvey fit, or like a good Falvey, this guy pitcher had a track record of success, was hurt, or just had a down year. I'm going to try and buy low on a 1-year deal and see what happens. I still think that's very much in play, but I think Falvey wouldn't have even, maybe you want Giolito just to get him in the building and see what happens, but I think Falvey probably didn't really want Giolito, because if you're going to get a guy who needs a bounce back season, you want to get time for an off season. You want to get time to work with them as coaches and as a staff before throwing them into the fire of the full 162 game season. But, at the end of the day, the Twins didn't want to, at the end of the day, throwing him into the fire of the postseason race probably wouldn't have been beneficial. It would have been good to get Giolito into Minnesota, but more as a signing in December and let him spend the whole winter and spring working with Twins coaches, or working with Twins coaches through Driveline or wherever, to try and help him become a better pitcher, instead of just getting him when he's broken and trying to ride him till the wheels fall off. That I don't think works out well. But speaking of riding things out until the wheels fall off, this is the 25-minute intro into what I wanted to lead the podcast off talking about, but then a couple other points I wanted to mention just kind of naturally flowed in first, and that is that the Cleveland Guardians got a whole bunch of guys off those waiver claims. They got Lucas Giolito. They got Matt Moore. They got Ronaldo Lopez. They got the 3 guys that the Twins really would have been interested in. Now, here's the thing about waiver claims is that it goes from the team with the worst record to the best record. And so all the teams at the bottom don't really want those guys because they're already not making the playoffs. And why would they want to take time away for a guy who's only going to be there for a month? So there's that. So it takes about half the teams in the league out of the equation. The other part is, though, there's teams that are chasing, and it goes by record. So there's teams who have a slightly worse record than the Twins. There's teams like the Guardians. There's teams like the Diamondbacks. There's teams all over the place who are still technically in the playoff hunt. And the Diamondbacks put in waiver claims on like 4 people and didn't get anybody. And once I heard that, I was like, yeah, the Twins definitely aren't getting anybody in this waiver claim process. So they don't have anybody. And even worse, the one team you're competing for in the division has them. And it's led to some speculation on Twitter. And there's been a couple different things with that have kind of came up. And one is, did the Twins losing those last 2 games? Because again, I've joked about it on Twitter. Is like, the Twins just lost these games to put them in a better position to get some of these waiver guys. It did not. And also, Cleveland got them. They won 2 games. They got some momentum. And so now they're like, we're only 5 games back of the Twins. If we can sweep them next week, we're right back in it with 20-some games to go. The thing is the Twins still have over 90% chance to win the division. It still is not looking good for the Guardians. The Twins still have a 5-game lead. Even if the Twins were to get swept by Cleveland, they would still likely have the division lead next week. And as long as the Twins can hold on to the division lead once they get done playing Cleveland, the end of the schedule is like Angels, Rockies, A's. There's the Mets are in the schedule at some point. I think outside of Tampa Bay, after next week, I don't think the Twins play another team with a winning record. They play the Mets at home. So things really open up favorably for the Twins later in the season. So which is why the whole, did Cleveland add these guys because they want to make one final push? Sure, probably. They probably wanted to do that. I mean, it doesn't hurt. Because here's the thing. Cleveland didn't trade for anybody at the trade deadline because their owner's cheap. They're cheap. They're a cheap organization. But you basically get these guys for free because you're paying their salary towards the end of the season. Well, that's basically like a month and change, whatever. You can live off that. So Cleveland took the risk and they took the shot, and they were going to try and see what they could do with Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, and Matt Moore. And Giolito, Twin Killer, will probably make a start against them next week and just absolutely light the Twins up. But I think if you're worried about Cleveland right now, I think you're maybe getting a little too out over yourself. Cleveland has to play Tampa Bay this weekend. Cleveland also has to play some first-place teams down the stretch. And by the way, the Minnesota Twins, they have, as we talked about, a really easy schedule to end the season. So it's going to take a lot. The Twins would have to only win like 10 games for the rest of the month. And I think even the 2022 Twins were able to win 10 games in the month of September. So the Twins would have to utterly collapse down the stretch. And not only that, Cleveland in like the final 30 or 28 or however many games are left would have to go 19-9 just to really get a shot, depending on, the head-to-heads and whatever, to really get a shot to take down the Twins. So which is to say, as long as the Twins play 500 baseball in the final 28 games, they're going to win this division. They're going to win the division with 83 games or 84 games or whatever it is, but who cares? They are close to winning the American League Central. And I still think the Twins do win the American League Central. I'm not here to tell you it's over. I'm not here to tell you the Twins are choke artists or that the division is gone, or I'm not trying to do anything in that nature. But what I am trying to say is that it did give Cleveland a little bit of life if the Twins were to sweep them. They probably don't make these waiver claims, which gets to the other assertion about Cleveland, which was, did they do this essentially just to F with Minnesota? Did they do this basically to say, well, the Twins want these guys, and, if we just take them from them, then they can't get them? And maybe that's happening. Maybe not. I guess I don't know enough about the GM or the president of baseball operations for the Indians to be able to definitively say that, they're just doing this to mess with the Twins. But certainly they're 5 games out of the division with less than 30 games to go. It's not looking good for Cleveland. They're going to have to win a whole lot of games in a hurry. And as we talk about, the Twins have not been able to win a ton of games in a row. The White Sox haven't been able to string much momentum together all season long anyways. So to say that the Cleveland Guardians are just creeping behind and waiting for their opportunity to pounce, I don't buy that. I think in this entire debacle, Did the Twins get better? No, they did not get better. They did not add anybody to their team. They did not add Ronaldo Lopez. They did not add Lucas Giolito. They did not add Matt Moore. And then this leads into the second question. Did the Twins ultimately get worse? No. Or like, does this hurt the Twins anymore? No. And I saw somebody point this out on social media. This isn't going to decide if the Twins win the division. The Twins are going to win the division. What this is going to decide, the Guardians picking up Lopez and Moore and Giolito is going to decide how many games the Twins win it by, which is like basically the nice way of saying that this isn't going to work and you're kind of wasting your time here if you're Cleveland. Now, again, maybe Cleveland can come back and win the division, and then maybe we'll all look foolish. But, right now the Twins are sitting with a 5-game lead on August 31st. I think it's pretty comfortable to say that the Twins are going to come away with the American League Central, albeit in a weak division, but still a win none the same. The Twins didn't get any worse, basically, after all of this. They didn't get any better. They didn't get any worse. It's a moot point. The Guardians just got a little better. Don't know why I have football on the brain, but thinking like Chicago Bears. I don't know why that was on my mind. Anyway, the Cleveland Guardians still 5 games back with like 28 to go. So I'm still taking the Timberwolves. Again, I'm like all off on my sports here. I have something in front of me. I have a Timberwolves bobblehead of Kevin Garnett, and I'm looking at that. So the Twins are still going to win the American League Central, and we'll be done with it. But again, I'm not going to sit here and wail and gnash of teeth about about these waiver claims, because the Twins never had a chance anyways. Multiple teams, if they didn't get through the Guardians, would have gotten to them. It just stinks that it got to Cleveland, and they're going to essentially try hard themselves the final few weeks of the season. Now, that being said, if the Twins sweep them next week, then it won't even matter, and then it's over. But again, the reason the Angels waived everybody on Monday was because that now all these players are going to be postseason eligible for their teams. And, with the Twins, they had an opportunity. They didn't get better. They didn't get worse with what happened today with the waiver stuff. But what did really set this team back was not trading for anybody at the deadline. And again, I know I talked about the team needs some high leverage arms too, and there hasn't quite been the high leverage arms, internally. But also at the same time, they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. And they had a chance, and I know it's out of their control, but it felt like, things really did not go our way. The trade deadline did not fall how we wanted. But look, some of these guys we wanted on the trade deadline, we could basically get for free if we claim them right. And by the time Falvey can even get to them, they're all gone. So that's the annoying part in this situation. All right, let's look at a few other things going on in Twins territory. Louis Varland is going to make a start in AAA St. Paul either tonight or tomorrow. And essentially, the point of this is he's only going to pitch 4 innings. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that important that he's only pitching 4 innings? And the reason is because he is going to move into a long relief type role. He's not going to be a guy who's going to pitch 5, 6, even 7 innings in a playoff game starting off a matchup. He's going to be a guy that comes into the bullpen, and a guy who comes into the bullpen and puts out fires and is your middle reliever. And honestly, this is how, if you're the Twins, you can supplement that back end of the bullpen not being so strong, as you can move a guy like Louis Varland to the bullpen. You can move a guy like Kenta Maeda to the starting rotation. You can, move a couple other guys to the rotation if you want. But again, Varland moving to the Twins rotation has been a big help. And we saw a little bit with Louis Varland. He can throw hard. If you put him in a shorter amount of time to throw, theoretically he's got more gas left in the tank. He can throw just a little bit harder, or at least be in a good position to. You also look at what Louis Varland has done. It's been pretty darn good. His St. Paul career this year has been fairly consistent, fairly good. Not necessarily ERA of like 0.5 or something like that, but a good ERA nonetheless. Varland can help out this team by coming out of the bullpen, and there's a few other guys who could go to the bullpen. Basically, anybody that's not Sonny Gray, that's not Pablo Lopez, and any guy that is not Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan had a good start last week. If he has another good start, I would pencil him in for that 3rd spot. Kenta Maeda is kind of creeping around, but I think he gets hit too hard after the 5th inning for really him to be thought of as anything more than a long reliever, and especially because he was already a long reliever in 2013, 2014. He was already a big guy in that aspect and helping out that way. So, with the Twins, with moving Varland to the pen, it gives them kind of this least. It gives them this opportunity to maximize that bullpen strength and be able to use those innings. Because again, I know people are going to talk about analytics, but it's not analytics necessarily, or it's not necessarily a flaw of analytics for things to turn out the way that they will in the postseason, which is the starters are not going to go long. There is going to be no Jack Morris 10-inning shutout game. There is not even really going to be a 7-inning shutout. Pitchers are going to go twice through the order. So whether it takes them 1 inning, whether it takes them 5 innings, they're not going to pitch for very long in the postseason. So what does that leave you to do? Well, it leaves you to have to go to some of your other bullpen guys who can try and help out and try and eat up starts for you and try and eat up innings, I should say, for you. And that's exactly what Louis Varland is going to do. That's what Kenta Maeda likely is going to do. That's what Dallas Keuchel is likely going to do. So the Twins have some decisions to make on how they want to structure that together and who wants to piggyback off of who. But I think right now that it's a good way for the Twins to be able to use these things. Now, I know people talk about, oh, but Jack Morris' 10-inning game and he did this and that. And the reason Jack Morris' 10-inning game is special because going 10 innings in a playoff game, throwing a complete game shutout is not an easy thing to do. Not everybody can do it. So they're going to need to bring in some guys. They're going to need to do things to try and circumvent that bullpen and try and rethink the wheel a little bit. And I think with the Twins, with what they're doing with putting Varland back there and also putting Vasquez back, thinking of Vasquez behind the plate. But again, putting Varland in that spot in the bullpen, putting Duran in there, putting Jackson there, all that stuff is going to help those guys out and really help out the Twins during a stretch playoff run. Because I know some people will look at the Twins and they'll say, but like, look at how often that they sub out their pitchers. Rocco's not giving him any leash. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. And to which I will say, a team with the Twins had a 96% chance to win the division. They could probably coast a little bit here. The starting rotation is at a 3.84 ERA this year, 5th best in the American League, while ranking 3rd in the league with a 5.6 innings per start average. So, I mean, the Twins aren't necessarily pitching deep into they're pitching deeper into games into regular season than they ever have before. But when they get to the postseason, that whole logic gets thrown out the window anyways in terms of postseason pitching. You kind of go through the lineup 1 to 2 times and you see how you're feeling. So if you can piggyback Louis Varland on top of Sonny Gray, and if you can piggyback Kenta Maeda onto Sonny Gray, and if you can, piggyback somebody else off of Pablo Lopez, this team is sitting in really, really good shape for a playoff run and to try and do some damage. So I think that that's the way to look at it. If you look at a guy like Bailey Ober, he got sent down to AAA because the arm basically fell off. He had a whole ton of arm fatigue, was not pitching well. So that was his demise. You look at, some of the other guys in this Twins rotation, and really, I think that multi-starter idea, or at least not even the very least of a multi-start idea, or like a, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I'm just going to move on. The whole point is the Twins have an opportunity here to do some stuff because, Sonny Gray has pitched the most innings he's pitched in almost 10 years. Louis Varland and Bailey Ober have never really thrown this many pitches before. You look at Sonny Gray, who's thrown Pablo Lopez has thrown a lot of innings. But again, he's not going to be relied upon to do that in the postseason. Bailey Ober's thrown the most amount of innings he ever has in a career. Joe Ryan would have gotten there if he didn't hurt his arm, or his groin, and he was out the last couple weeks. So the point is to say, if these Twins pitchers are a little bit banged up, if you use the bullpen right, and if you can have Kenta Maeda start the game and get 5 innings, then have Varland come in and go 2, well, now all of a sudden you're to the 7th inning, and you can use some of those higher leverage guys in those high leverage late game situations. And really, that's kind of the gist of it. I mean, the gist of it is you piggyback starters. You get 3 good innings out of Sonny Gray. You get 3 good innings out of Dallas Keuchel, and boom, you're into the 7th inning, and you can use Duran, Pagan, Jax, or some order of those 3. So I think that's how a potential Twins playoff bullpen looks like, and I think that's the way that they circumvent not getting any help, and I think that's the way that they circumvent the podcast and the computers and trying to deal with all of that, and, I think it's probably easier for them as well. So, and by the way, everybody does it with the bullpen thing. Everybody now is using a shorter starter and a longer arm to come out of the bullpen and help out. So that's pretty much where that stands with that. Let's see. What else do we got here? No, I think that's pretty much it. I think we've covered all the topics that we need to cover. Appreciate you guys joining in. One last time, I guess I just want to make my point clear on the Twins pitching, because I wrote about it for zone coverage. Again, Sonny Gray has thrown 150 innings already. He puts him on pace for his most innings since 2015 when he, 2015 when he threw 208 pitches. Ober, again, got sent down because his arm kind of fell off. If you look at some of these other Twins guys, Kenta Maeda is a guy who could, I've thought for a while, I've advocated for Kenta Maeda to not pitch out of the bullpen in the postseason, but I think the way things have gone and Joe Ryan coming back and looking strong, I think Kenta Maeda going to the postseason isn't necessarily an indictment on Maeda, but more as it is just kind of a credit to the young guy and the work that he's been doing to try and turn the program around a little bit turn it around a little bit. Anyway, so that's the whole gist. That's the thing. I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. I'm getting towards the end of the podcast. My mind's in a couple different spots here. I got to go do play-by-play for a game later today, so I apologize if this end of the stream is being a little bit more frazzled. So I do apologize for that. Again, Twins bullpen isn't good. The starting rotation has been really good, so pluck from that depth, use it in the back end. You're only going to need 3 starters for the wild card series anyways, so use Pablo Lopez, use Joe Ryan, use Sonny Gray as well. And I think one last thing, we'll end the podcast on this, is Sonny Gray threw an absolute masterclass yesterday. 7 innings, only gave up 3 hits, had 4 or 5 strikeouts, and no earned runs, and put the Twins in a very much position to win a all-out pitchers duel with BB of Cleveland. And for the Twins not to do that is just so incredibly frustrating. But I think the positive note is it does add to my, about a month ago, maybe a little bit less, I said on the podcast, they said, I don't know, I would not sign Kenta Maeda to a long-term extension. And I really think with signing Sonny Gray to that long-term extension, is he going to take the qualifying offer? Is he going to do that? I think really with Sonny Gray having this good stretch over the last month or so basically proves that he is going to get the qualifying offer, and Sonny Gray will be not necessarily pitching for the Twins next year, but that qualifying offer will get the Twins a first-round level draft pick in next year's draft if Sonny Gray goes on and signs with another team, or Sonny Gray takes the qualifying offer and pitches 1 year on $20 million, which, if you're the Twins, wouldn't exactly be the worst thing in the world, because you'd still have Gray, you would still have Pablo Lopez, you'd have Chris Paddock, you'd have Joe Ryan, you'd have Bailey Ober, you'd have somebody else thrown into the mix. The Twins have a lot of starting pitchers right now, and it's a really fun thing to see that kind of develop over the years. Or how it will develop over the years and how it has developed over this season. That's maybe the better way to word it. All right, that's going to end it for the podcast. I will put Sonny Gray on the qualifying offer if I was Derek Falvey. I do think the Twins are going to win the division still. I do not think the waiver claims are going to bother the team as much as maybe fans on social media are. It was completely out of the Twins' control anyways. The only thing you can rip them for is not doing enough at the trade deadline, which I think they could have did more at the trade deadline. All right, that's going to do it for me. I'm CJ Baumgartner. This has been Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. Thanks for checking in, and we will check at you next time. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.